Hello, my name is Rich Howard, owner of Architectural Builder Supply, and this video is to bring you a closer look at the Bommer number LB5080-450-646 lubricated bearing, 5-knuckle, full mortise, 5/8 radius corner, steel base, removable pin satin nickel hinge. So that LB5080-450-646 all conspires to mean this hinge. And let's dissect that part number now. LB means lube bearing or lubricated bearing. It's a concealed sort of proprietary bearing structure from Bommer. Those bearing packets are concealed. They're concealed, which allows them a greater amount of lifespan, high performance sort of operation compared to standard bearing packets that would be exposed. Okay, they're also a cleaner look too. It certainly looks like a 5-knuckle hinge without seeing those bearing packets, those ball bearing packets that are there. Some people like the concealed look of the lube bearing hinge. Why you would have that would be for possibly aesthetics, obviously performance, because a ball bearing hinge is always superior to a plain bearing hinge. You might have a fire rated door. You very likely could, even though it's 5/8 radius. That's a tip that it may not be completely fire rated. But the rest of the part number, LB5080, is going to mean those lube bearing, ball bearing packets that are there. The 5080 means a number of things. It first of all means that it's a full mortise hinge. You can see from the swag on the hinge leaves there that they're meant to be brought parallel to each other and flush to the edge of the door and frame. That means that it's a 5-knuckle hinge. Okay, it means it's steel based. It means that it is a 5/8 radius. Okay, 5/8 radius you're going to see in a wood door. Wood door, wood frame is where you're going to see that. Okay, so you could have a residential application or a commercial application where you've got wood frames and you have wood doors, and those corners are 5/8 radius. And where the 5/8 radius comes from is when the wood door, wood frame manufacturer is creating the mortises either on automated equipment or machinery or on a production line or by hand. They're using an 1.25" diameter bit. And the purpose of that is that there's much less work to do as you're cutting the door and frame when you've got a much bigger bit. Well, a 1.25" diameter bit is going to leave a 5/8 radius. Okay, that's why people would order that. The -450 means that this hinge is 4.5 by 4.5. The height is the first dimension on a hinge like this, 4.5 by 4.5. It's important to understand that the height is the first dimension. Not so much on a hinge that's square like this, but if you had a wide throw hinge and it was 4.5 by 6, it's not 4.5 by 6, it's 4.5 by 6. That's where the difference comes in. Or a common hinge is 5 by 4.5. Heavier usage sorts of 1.75" doors will have a 5" by 4.5" hinge. The ability of a hinge to hold the door or a heavier door significantly goes up as the height of the hinge increases. So it's important to know it's height first. It's the opposite of a way that a door is sized. Hinges are. So that's 450, that means 4.5, 4.5. 646, that means two things. We've already covered one of them. Means it's steel base, means it's satin nickel finish. Okay, so if this was a hinge that was brass based, it would not be 646, it would be 619. That would mean brass base with a satin nickel finish. This hinge is sold as each 5/8 radius corner, lubricated bearing, concealed, 5-knuckle, full mortise, 5/8 radius. Standard weight, that means that this hinge is 134 thousandths of an inch leaf thickness. That's considered standard weight. Might also be considered heavy duty if it was a commercial, if it was a residential application. But this is standard weight. 4.5 by 4.5 satin nickel. Removable pin, meaning that there's no provision to secure that pin in the assembly. So this would be an interior door or an exterior door that swung in, where you could you could easily pull the pin out of the hinge by driving a nail into here and tapping it out. This is not what you would want if it was an exterior door that swung out, or a door, maybe interior, that you didn't want to have that pin tampered with. You'd want a non-removable pin hinge or a safety stud pin hinge. If you want to talk about those, feel free to reach out to us. But that would all but eliminate the possibility of removing the pin from the hinge assembly. Okay. There is a link below this video to the cut sheet, and that cut sheet shows everything important dimensionally about the hinge, in particular where all the screw holes are located. That might be important to know. That's called template pattern, and it is defined by those dimensions on the template. In the lower left-hand corner, you'll see a table that's actually quite interesting. You'll have a steel hinge column, a brass or bronze hinge column, and then a stainless steel hinge column. You'll see how that fourth number in the first part of the part number changes. 0 for steel, 1 for brass or bronze, and the brass or bronze depends on the finish that you're doing. If you're doing oil rubbed bronze, it would be a bronze-based material. If you were doing satin brass, it'd be a brass-based material, typically. If you want these in stainless steel, that 5080 will change to 5082. The 2 means stainless steel. Coastal applications, or a situation where it was maybe in an interior application with a fiberglass door and it was a pool, you know, a health club, a condo, hotel, you might want stainless steel. Okay. The 5080, going down below that, is the 8080. Same hinge, 3 knuckle is the only difference. BB5080 is this same hinge but with exposed bearing packets. LB5080 is LB8080, forgive me, is concealed with a 3 knuckle. LB5080 is not listed on that table. This hinge is actually quite atypical to buy. You don't sell everything is fairly common on this hinge, but the confluence of the size, the ball bearing, the radius corner clash doesn't mean that won't work for you. I've sold these hinges to people that have exterior doors and balconies, and they're 1 3/4 inch, and they need a 5/8 radius, and they need a 4.5 by 4.5, and they need a commercial grade or a standard duty hinge. Okay. This hinge is available, of course, in all of those different variations of bearing options, safety pin options, 1/4 inch radius, square corner, decorative tips. This hinge is what's called a button tip, and that's typical. You can get that with a ball tip, the most common of the decorative tips, urn tip, steeple tip, acorn tip, all that can be done. Okay. Great quality hinge. The last thing I'd like to point out to you, other than the fact that screws are included, I should have said that a while ago, wood screws and machine screws. Last thing I'd like to point out to you now is that the Bommer logo, and right above it it says Made in the USA, a fact that Bommer is quite proud of, as am I to represent them. If you have any questions on the Bommer LB5080-450-646 hinge or any other Bommer product, please feel free to reach out to us.